Welcome to Think Aside. Today we're going to talk about prescription drugs and specifically why they're so expensive, or rather, one of the reasons why they're so expensive. This is something that I've been curious about for a long time. I think the majority of us have heard something about drugs and how expensive they are. You hear big pharma and the money they make off the drugs and stuff like that. And I never really thought much more about it. I just knew there was something up with it. And so I started to do some research, and what I found right off is that most other countries end up only paying about 56% of what we pay here in the United States of America. And there's a few reasons why that is, but one of the biggest reasons is because most other countries, what they do is they end up negotiating the prices with the drug companies beforehand, before they go on the market, and they kind of agree on a price that they can charge for those drugs. And the other factor is that they're allowed a patent for their drug, which gives them 10 to 15 years with no more than 20 years of exclusivity, meaning that no other drug company can make their drug and sell it. And that's the chemical compound that makes the drug what it is. And so here in the United States, there's a few factors that kind of um, I guess, cause some problems with that and why it's kind of an issue. Is one of them being that the United States of America, they as we've talked about before, they kind of give this illusion of a free market. They allow some aspects to make it look like a free market, but then they meddle in other ways, which causes problems. It causes a manipulated market, and that's something that oftentimes the bigger companies benefit from, whether it's a big bank or whether it's a big company in general, Google, Amazon, whatever. And so in this case, there's these big drug companies that are able to get a patent for that 10 to 15 years. Oftentimes they max it out at 20 years, it seems. And then from there, they have a few different allowed rules that the government actually allows them to extend that life. And so before we get too far into the patents and how those work, let's just talk about what a patent is, being, like I said, the exclusivity. When a patent expires, what happens is other companies can make a generic version of it and they can sell it for cheaper, right? It opens up the market, allowing for anyone to have a price that they want. And so it's a free market at that point, allowing for each company to charge a different amount. And when, of course, there's multiple companies making the same drug, they have to compete with the cost. So they go cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. It drives down the cost, which then, of course, makes it more reasonable and more available for the patient, for us people in the civilization. And so that's the benefit to that. So each what the government does specifically in the United States is it allows for a few different things. So if the drug has a new use case, if it is allowed to say it's out to solve diabetes, but it ends up lowering blood pressure, for example, then what happens then is it allows for the drug to get an extra, I want to say, 3 years. So it allows for an extra 3 years on the patent. So that brings it up to 23 years. Another way it can be extended is through reformulating the drug, which allows it to be administered a different way. When this happens, they can extend the patent life even longer through that. It's one of those things that the government allows them to do if they're being innovative. Um, Not necessarily inventive, because of course that would be creating something brand new, but that they argue innovation in the sense that they're kind of helping bring forward the industry is kind of the idea behind it. Of course, that can be abused and manipulated. One of the biggest factors that can extend a patent life is if it's considered an orphan drug, and it's specifically for people with rare diseases, and it can extend the life 7 years. And so you can end up with, if you figure 3 years, use the 7 years, that's 30 years in total with the 20 years. So you have 30 years plus another however many you get for if you end up reformulating the drug. So that ends up with multiple different, reasons to extend it. Of course, then they can throw a bunch of jargon and whatever else to kind of delay the process of expiration. Nobody really seems to know exactly when it's expiring. Different drugs, they have like set dates when it would ideally expire based on the date that it was registered as a patent. Um, So going with the orphan drugs, something that can happen is, the idea behind this is that they extend the patent life to allow these companies to recoup their costs. The problem with that is, of course, that because they're able to recoup it longer, something that happens with patents is, of course, as time goes on, to kind of get their ample profit, they will start to raise the prices more and more. And this could be a few different reasons. It could be completely harmless, but I see it as a potential reason being that if you start off with you price it kind of low, create an entry barrier low, so that way multiple people can get on it, many people become on it, and then all at once you have, say, 250,000 people taking this drug, and all at once you start to up the price. Well, they're already on this drug, and now they have to choose: do I go with something else that's not going to work as well, or that might cause different side effects that I'm not used to, that my body's not used to? Do I have to readjust, or do I just take the one that costs a little more money now, and then next year it's going to raise some more? Do I continue? And so that's what I can see that as, is, of course, over time they start taking this drug, and then it starts to go the price gets higher and higher and higher and higher, and they just keep having to pay it because it's what they're on. And so compare that to the orphan drugs. It's the same idea. If it's a 30-year potential, excuse me, if it's a 30-year instead of a 20-year, then that extends the life period even longer, where they can start price gouging later and later and later. So oftentimes with orphan drugs, they all are already, from what I could tell, 25 times higher in price than the normal drugs on the market. And so they're making far more profit right off the bat. And the reason for this is, you could argue, is to absorb the cost of the research, being that, the government, that's the initial reason for the patents to begin with, is to help absorb the costs of all of the research and all the trials and things like that, and then of course to also absorb the costs of any failed drugs that they went through that ended up not being approved by the FDA, or wasn't effective, and weren't effective, things like that. And so they have these drugs that end up being 25 times more expensive, which you could argue is, whatever, but they also have shorter trial periods, meaning that they don't have to test them as long. They don't have to run experiments on them as long, and concentrated trials. And so it's cheaper to begin with because of that. So of course this comes with some severe problems, is that when you have the patients are, effectively dying, they have these rare diseases that need to be cured, and then you target them with very high prices, knowing that they have no choice but to pay them, and you give them drugs that are potentially dangerous, being that they don't have as much research backing them. You run into some problems. Now, there's a few other aspects you can get into, but I wanted to give this backstory, or this back information about how the patents work, or the problems, and kind of some of the intricacy, without getting too in depth, because my main point here is mentioning that the government meddles slightly, just enough to cause some problems, and then again gives that illusion of a free market. In this case, knowing that some governments, what they'll do is they'll negotiate the price and they'll give a patent, it kind of works together in a sense, and it allows for a little more, a little less abuse to be done toward the patient. And we could argue, of course, that patents and regulating prices and stuff is not good, that free market is the way to go, of course. So you can argue that, but that's not what we're trying to do here. I'm not trying to prove one way or the other is better. I have my own opinion, just as you do, but the goal that I'm trying to achieve here is bringing the point that the government should go one way or the other, because otherwise it ends up benefiting the person who understands it most, and that ends up being the drug companies. The drug companies have understood it to the point now where they know how to abuse it to their advantage. And so what I mean by that is, they set the patents, and they give them these patents so that way they can absorb the costs and make profit for a set amount of time. They know that they can charge what they want, but that's the thing, they can charge what they want. The government doesn't inhibit them from charging a certain price. They don't negotiate the price or anything like that. All the FDA does is it says, is it effective and is it safe? If it is, you're good to go. As a result, it comes onto the market, they price absurdly high and continue to price even higher, Meanwhile, there is no free market in the sense that patents are stopping the free market from allowing competitors to bring down the prices. In a free market, that's what would happen, right? Is you have competing prices, and it kind of controls itself because if a drug is priced at, well, for instance, Humira at one point was priced at $4,480 for 2 kits of the drug, meaning 30 days prescription roughly. If that was priced at that, a generic version can come in, take that exact compound, being that it's up in the open, and they can then from there they can take it and they can say, we'll charge, it only costs us say $100 to make these 2 kits of prescription, so we're going to charge $350. And then another drug company comes and said, no, we can make it for $50 and we can charge $275 or whatever. And so they can do this, and it allows for competition, and it brings down the price naturally for the consumer, for the patients. But instead we have the system where we allow them to price whatever they want, but then we protect that price by giving them a patent saying nobody else can make this for this amount of time. So that's where the problem lies, and that's why you have other countries who end up having lower prices, is because they regulate the price and they give them a patent. So neither one of them is inherently bad. I mean, you could argue that, but working together, it works much better than only doing half of the fix, right? And that's kind of what they did, is they kind of cut the Band-Aid in half and stopped some of the bleeding, but not all of it, instead of either one, putting a full Band-Aid on, stopping the bleeding, or ripping the Band-Aid off, or not putting one, allowing it to heal itself, right? And so that's kind of the issue that we run into here, and that's what I wanted to mention is, think aside the idea that the government, specifically with the drug companies even, that they're that they're helping with the patents by allowing, because that's the thing is, again, we're giving that illusion of free market because, well, we're allowing them to set whatever price they want and regulate itself, but then you're not allowing it to regulate itself because you're stopping anyone else from setting any other prices. And so that's the big issue we run into with medical in general, is it's becoming very commercialized because of it, because of the money. I read a statistic saying that it was like the drug companies were outpacing general medical or medicine by like over 1%. It's like each year medical goes up 5.4%, I want to say, and then the drug companies, their prescriptions go up about 6.6%, I want to say. I didn't write it down, but it's per year, so it's outpacing what other medical fields go. And so that's obviously an issue in itself. You figure you have this drug that no longer needs any research, no longer has costs to absorb, and they're making billions of dollars a year, and then they're raising that by 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever percent each year because they can. And no one's stopping them. There's no one to compete. There's no one to challenge that unless another company comes out with a better drug and beats them. That's the only way. So that's kind of what I wanted to, as I've mentioned, that's what I wanted to talk about, is think aside the idea that drug companies are, that we're protected from drug companies, or that drug companies have your best interest, or that their whole purpose for business is to help you. They're not. They're in it for the money. It's a market, and so they target people. It's just like anything else, and you can. I think I did a pretty decent job here of mentioning a few ways that they can take advantage of you, knowing that say your life is on the line and you have no other choices. They're going to target you, and it becomes, because of the way the system is created with the patents and such, and the money, the prices being unlimited, they can target those people that are desperate and then take advantage as much as they want with no one to stop them. Thank you. Think aside.